Hi, welcome back to Season 4, Episode 6 of Everyday NLP Bites in Conversation with. For those of you that have not been watching or listening to earlier podcasts, my name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm also the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum and the co-author of Everyday NLP, a book that I co-wrote with my friend and associate Eleni Sarantanu, and that book now forms the pre-course reading for our NLP courses. Throughout this series, I've been talking to people who are NLP trainers and coaches about what's been important to them in NLP and specifically how they used it in their life and work. This week is particularly special because my guest is Sarah Frossell from Frossell Partners. Sarah is a speaker and a consultant and a pioneer of NLP in the UK. But even more special to me than that, Sarah was my trainer for my practitioner and master practitioner and has left an indelible mark on me. That is a good indelible mark, or at least I hope it is. So I'm going to pass over to Sarah to find out from her what has been important to her in NLP and how she's used it in her life and work. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Florence. It's great to see that the people I train are still training out there, because I'm the oldest person in the game. I don't really know what's been important to me about NLP, except that I use it in everything I do. And I think I well remember the very first time I went on an NLP course. By coffee break, I decided I must do this. I'd gone on it because I was working with dyslexic students, and I was pretty horrified by the way mostly they'd been taught. I was sure that what 15, 16, 14-year-olds who had no ability to write down how brilliant they were needed wasn't lots of slow stuff about sounds, but was much more something that got their heads fixed. Got them aligned, got them feeling good, got them understanding how good they were. And I very rapidly realized that this was a very quick and very effective way of doing that. So I guess that's been important. In recent years, I mean, I also am a coach and I teach people to coach, but in recent years, I've been running an NIHR research study on using NLP with people with ME. Working with people who are in bed mostly. Some people have been ill for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So, and to good effect. So I suppose, I just think it's an amazing set of skills.
So give us a wee bit more detail. I'm very aware that people watching or listening to this, some are very well educated, if you like, in NLP, and maybe people less so, but are curious. So with either education or ME, or preferably both, tell us a wee bit more about how you've actually been using NLP.
Well, I guess in education, I used it particularly with, I ran the first dyslexia unit in the country. So we're talking years ago now. Mm-hmm. And it was all about strategy. How do you help students who are finding a difficulty with something develop a strategy that allows them to demonstrate how brilliant they actually are. The definition of dyslexia is that a child will have an IQ that's very high IQ, but will typically have difficulties either with reading or with spelling or with putting things down. They may be dyslexic, they may be dyspraxic. So a lot of it was about giving people strategies to help them organize themselves. I do remember one person who'd been one of my students saying to me years later when he was doing a psychology degree, he rang me up and said, we're just doing hypnotic commands, Sarah. I mean, did you use them on us? Well, actually, I don't think I did, but I think as a teacher, I always was using stuff that said, look, come on, you're very bright. Let's find a way of demonstrating this to people so that you can take exams and you can get the qualifications you need and live the life you want to live. So that was teaching. With with working with the with people with ME, that was sort of slightly different. Over the years, I've worked with individuals with ME. Occasionally, people have come to me. I've worked a little bit with people with cancer. I've worked with people with strokes, and helped. In most cases, it's helped enormously.
Yeah.
With ME, basically what happened was that somebody who had ME came on one of my NLP courses. She'd been for 13 years in a wheelchair. Wow. She'd been ill for 20 years altogether. At one point, she'd been so bad she had to have her hair washed. She had to be fed, and you know, I was working with people who were that extreme at the beginning, and I think what she said to me was, I may not be able to stay. And I said, well, that's fine. You just leave when you want to leave. Actually, she never left and rapidly became hugely better. And then we decided that we would see if we could work with other patients. I suppose they would be called patients, but people who had ME, who got into that terrible thing. Her mother happened to be a doctor who'd, of course, got interested in it when her daughter had it. So between us, we were able to pull together a whole load of patients. So we did a sort of co-researching using NLP. And we were funded by the National Institute of Health Research to do an investigation. And although it was a very small study, we actually have got incredibly good results. So, you know, so how does one do that? Well, you've got a lot of helping people unlearn first. Yeah. You know, when you take dyslexic students well, mine came to me at 13, they've already been damaged by all sorts of educational things that have gone wrong for them. It's exactly the same with people who have a disease or a disease that is not easy to understand why it's there. 40% of doctors only will recognize it as a real disease, although the World Health Organization sees it as a neurological disease. I think what's the problem for a lot of doctors is they don't know what to do to help it. So, you know, it's easier to say it doesn't exist. It's a psychological fantasy. It's definitely not. It's pretty awful. But I think what does happen is that if you've been ill for a long time and your body gives out on you, you lose the sense of your body doing what you need it to do, and you get a sense of, no matter what I do, it's going to come back. So every time you get a sensation, you think, oh my God, it's come back. I mean, I remember a police officer who'd been ill for 8 years saying to me one day when we were working, oh my God, it's coming back. And I said, how do you know? And he said, my muscles in my legs are twitching. The muscles in my thighs are twitching. So I said, okay, let's talk to the muscles in your thighs, shall we? And I said, just calm down. Let's just go inside and let's just ask the muscles why they're twitching. What are they doing it for? And there was a long, long pause, and he looked and he thought and whatever. And then he said, they're telling me they're supposed to twitch. That's what muscles are supposed to do. You know, it's the sort of, it's that sort of thing. But I guess what we do mainly with people with ME is we're aware that they've lost sight of ever being better. Yeah. And unfortunately, doctors tell them that they're not, you know, they're going to have to live with it for life. So the very first thing we do is we use a sort of future timeline process where we get them to imagine themselves recovered. We don't do that very quickly, you know. We do a number of things, and what I usually do is I bring in a recovered patient to work as my sidekick. Yeah. So every time they've got a question, we can ask the person who's recovered, when you did this thing, what happened for you? Because it'll be different for different people.
Yeah. It occurred to me as I'm listening to you, well, first of all, the idea that seeing somebody that has been through that process is another way of informing the unconscious. Look, this isn't just something to be hoped for. This is possible and achievable. And And it occurs to me, listen to you, whether it's, students with dyslexia or people with a condition like ME, is what is the unconscious being told? And it seems to me that you're basically giving the unconscious, or getting the person to give their unconscious a very different message. And I suppose whichever way, both are a self-fulfilling prophecy, aren't they? If you keep telling yourself, this, I will never recover from this, and this is how it is, then it's kind of no wonder. And I suppose if people are inactive for a period of time because of that, then there will be a physical outcome to that.
Well, yes, there is. And, the other bit is that, of course, when people are that ill, what they usually do is go looking for anything and everything.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, recently I had somebody who came on one of my introductory courses who'd been recommended because she had a daughter who had ME. She was very keen that the daughter should work with me. The daughter was very nice and we got on fine. But the daughter said, I've had so many things which have turned out to be disappointing. I'm not really prepared to do another one. Understand a problem, you can understand. I've also had people who've done some things 3 times. And, I said to my researcher, Claire, this is a bit ridiculous. I'm having to help them unlearn. The people with whom it's easy are the people who've not actually done all that, people who've just succumbed to the illness. But there aren't many of those.
Yeah.
Most people who get ME are very keen on oh, that's my husband bringing me a cup of coffee. I hope nobody minds this.
I wasn't sure if you were allowed.
This is a conversation between friends, and a coffee is definitely allowed. Sarah, I've got a wee story to tell you. I don't even know if you knew this at the time, but I've been fortunate not to suffer with ME. But when I came on your course, which was 1998, and for anybody watching, I joined Sarah's course as a child. Sort of.
I was a child as well.
yeah, we were both children when all that started. But when I came on that course with you, I had a problem with my shoulders. And I had actually been to see my doctor, and my doctor had told me I had arthritis in my shoulders and wanted to put me on a course of ibuprofen. Well, meaning, of course. But I said to the doctor at the time, well, if I take this for a month, then what happens? And they said, well, nothing, we'll just put you on another course. And I said, well, that's not really a solution. So I had no idea at those early stages in NLP that NLP would have anything to do with helping with this problem with my shoulders, because it hadn't occurred to me that there was an important piece of connective tissue here between my head and the rest of my body. I worked it out pretty quickly. But if I just do a demonstration, as you can see, I know my background means my arms have disappeared, but even though my arms disappear when I do that, Glenn, clearly not then and not now do I have arthritis in my shoulders. But during the course of the time that we spent together, that pain eased. So somewhere along the line, I was learning a strategy of my own and giving my unconscious a very different message, I have to say, under your guidance. And I'm very grateful for that.
Well, and I think what happens, one of the things that I have to help people do is decouple, if you like, from the hypnotic commands that doctors may have given them or that their families give them, but particularly doctors, because even though I was working in the NHS down in Dorset and with a rheumatologist who thought what we were doing was fantastic, he would still, and still does from time to time when he first meets people, says things like, you're just going to have to put up with this and live with it for the rest of your life. And the girls in the service down there now who've all done NLP go, no, Selwyn, no, she doesn't have to live, or he doesn't have to live with it for the rest of his life. You do know this. You do know that we actually can solve this problem.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that a lot of people don't want to do what they think is as talking therapy because they assume it means that you've got they assume it means it's a psychological problem.
Yes.
We spend a lot of time at the beginning of our group sessions, and we do believe in group sessions. Although obviously when we went and worked with people in bed, we had to go and see them in bed before we could get them into a group. So there was one-on-one, but it is quite fascinating how doctors are really still not talking about body mind, you know, even though Candice Pert all those years ago sort of established it, and the fact that, you know, there's going to be a psychological or an emotional connection to any physical illness. You know, I mean, I have had since I was 30 something an atrial flutter, and it got particularly bad a few years ago, and I literally couldn't even walk into town. You know, I'd think, oh, shall I walk into town? And then I'd think, can I get back? Now, I think that's what happens to people with post-viral or ME or CFS or whatever you want to call it. And it's going to be happening to a lot of people with COVID, I think, with, you know, this long COVID thing. And it's surprising how you adapt to that. You know, even now I'll think, can I walk into town? And then I think, of course I can walk into town. I bounce along, and I'm finding myself sort of leaping up hills in front of people, and then thinking, oh my God, I couldn't do that before. So I think, you know, we very quickly get into a pattern, don't we?
Well, yeah, it's interesting just listening to you saying a few years ago, I had the privilege of doing some work with John Grinder. And of course, this is his big area of interest now, is the link between the unconscious mind and disease, or dis-ease as you refer to it, or the conditions that people have. And, you know, I think that's gaining a bit of traction, and quite a bit of traction, and people becoming very interested. His basic idea is, well, the unconscious is creating this condition for some reason, probably, not probably, for some well-intentioned reason. And yet it's not necessarily the best way of tackling that, but it's just, you were talking about doctors before and how they say things and families say things. This comes from, I would imagine, a really well-meaning place and managing people's expectations. But of course, that's the message that someone is getting, and more importantly, their unconscious is getting. So, yeah, I so interested here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm interrupted you. No, I mean, my view is that when people haven't recovered from something, you know, which is long, that somehow the immune system has got stuck in the full on. And, you know, we know all sorts of things that we didn't know. Like, we know that people with ME, CFS have a lot of, or far more pro-inflammatory cytokines running around their system, which is exactly what happens at the beginning of a resistance to a disease, or resistance to anything. So an awful lot of what we're talking about is, we talk about beliefs, and we talk about seeing oneself recovered, and stepping into it and feeling it for a bit, but you know, and also the unconscious mind having some conflict. What I can tell you, though, is that the people who get better don't go back into the situation that they were in that caused the issue in the first place. And that's one of the most tricky things, because if you're a high-paid accountant, say, who really doesn't like your work but is good at it and you can earn a lot, the moment you go back, you think you should go back as an accountant. And of course, that's probably what made you ill in the first place. It just didn't suit you. You know, so I think there are all sorts of things like that. Yeah.
Well, that kind of stands to reason too. Sarah, thank you. Well, thank you for what we did together 20 years ago, and thank you for this conversation now. I know that you'll have piqued a lot of people's interest with what you've been speaking about. So if people would like to get in touch with you, can you just tell me what your website is? By the way, this information will also go in the blurb that goes with this. So if someone is listening or watching this, they don't necessarily have to scrabble for a pen, but just anyway, just tell us, what's your website?
Well, my website is a very old one that somebody else did for me.
Oh, I see.
But you can,
the best way
well,
to get in contact with
the
you?
best way to contact me is just contact me by messaging me or by emailing me. So
Okay.
probably messaging me is the best, you know, on so my mobile phone number where you can message me is 07932 173 129.
Okay. Well, I'll put that information, as I say, with the information that goes with this podcast, whether someone is watching the audio version or the video version.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to, you know, I'm very happy to respond to people.
Yeah. As I say, I'm sure you've piqued a lot of people's curiosity and the things that you've said, because I mean, so many people are touched by one or other of those conditions.
Okay,
So
good.
it just remains for me to say thank you to Sarah, and thank you to those of you who are watching or listening. And next week's podcast will be with my co-author of Everyday NLP, Eleni Sarantonu. So join us then for a bit of fun then too. Thank you.
Thanks.